We encode things in a certain way. And there's a certain type of encoding that moves learning forward. It's called elaborate encoding. Elaborate encoding. It's a special way of taking in information. You know this, and I knew this. The story I'm going to tell is something you have probably lived through over and over again. So we go and get Chick-fil-A. As I leave the house, I have written down on a sheet of paper exactly what everybody wants. But as I walk out the door, my wife yells, "Get extra Chick-fil-A sauce." I turn and say, "Got it." I then get in the car. I go through the drive-thru. I get everything that's on the list. Yeah, because I passively encoded it, not actively or elaborately encoded it. So what do I need to do to have elaborate encoding? Number one is there has to be some reason for the student to want to engage. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. The same thing applies to teaching and learning. Most research on teaching and learning assumes a motivated student. Now, I was born at night, but it wasn't last night. That's not an assumption you and I can make. So the first thing I have to do is get them, in other words, they have to want to be involved. They have to want to tackle it. Without that, you're not going to get elaborate encoding. The second thing that has to be there are multiple representations. Now, this is really super cool. In other words, we have to create an experience that gets them access to the content, the skills, and the understandings through multiple pathways, not just one. It can't just be notes. It can't just be a video. It has to be a combination of multiple sense organs and emotion. That's the motivation part. The last one's really important. It has to do with patterns. Elaborate encoding requires that learners get to find the patterns and then apply it to a different context versus us asking them to repeat a pattern I gave them. When I taught trig, I used to think it was important for me to work problems on the board and just say, okay, now go do problems like this 4,952 times. They were repeating patterns. Versus, here's a problem and its solution. Here's a second problem and its solution. With a neighbor, compare and contrast the approach this student took to solve each of these problems. How are they similar? How are they different? Now here's a third problem. How is that different from the previous two? What do you notice? What patterns are there? Now, what pattern would you apply to this problem? It's a very different learning experience.